All right, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. This is our SJSU Grad Slam information session. Can you all hear me? Yes? Okay, great. My name is Julia Dunn. I am the Graduate Enrollment Support Specialist over in the College of Graduate Studies. I am here with my colleague Cheryl Cowan, who is an associate with the college, and we're also very excited to have Amy Russo with us. She is the multilingual writing coordinator over at the Writing Center, and we'll be talking later on about some of our public speaking sessions associated with this opportunity. So we're very excited to have her here. Today we're going to be sharing some general information about SJSU's Grad Slam competition. We will talk about why you should participate, the process and the application, including how to put together an abstract. We'll talk about what happens if you become a semifinalist in the competition. We'll talk about some important deadlines, some examples of Grad Slam presentations with Amy's great commentary on those videos. And then we will end with some Q&A. So we do want to remind folks to please stay muted. Throughout the session, we will have plenty of time at the end for some questions. But if you do have questions throughout the session, you may put them in the chat as well. And as Cheryl mentioned, we will be recording the session, so feel free to leave your camera off if you do not wish to be seen in the recording. And with that, I will hand it over to Cheryl.
Hi, everyone. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about what the Grad Slam is at San Jose State University. You may have heard of this competition referred to as the 3-minute thesis competition, which takes place in universities throughout the world. At San Jose State, we call this competition the Grad Slam. We started this event back in 2019, and our winner went all the way to regionals and did very well. In 2020, the event was canceled because of the pandemic, but we're bringing it back virtually this year. It involved you communicating your research to a non-specialist audience in 3 minutes or less. That means that you are going to talk about your research to your mom, to a friend, someone that maybe perhaps doesn't have the background that you do or the knowledge that you have. What this does is it makes your research visible and relevant to others. San Jose State's doing a lot of research right now, and you may see sometimes things come across your news feeds, but we have students doing just so much. And so this gives us a chance to get your research out in front of the public. On top of that, it helps you develop strong communication skills. And we'll go into that a little bit as we move along. To participate, you must be a matriculated student at San Jose State in a master's or a doctoral program. I do want to mention here that students who are enrolled in 1290R and are completing their research are eligible to participate. You have to be an individual presenter. While your research may have been formulated as part of a team, there are no group presentations.
And most importantly, we really do encourage students from all disciplines and all fields to apply for the Grad Slam. So whether you're building a widget, you're chasing fires, you're developing new counseling techniques, whatever it is that you may be doing, we would love to see you represented in the Grad Slam. So this is not a competition that is restricted to any particular field. You're all encouraged to apply regardless of what field you're in. So there are many, many reasons why you should consider applying to the Grad Slam. For one, we do offer some cash prizes for winners. So the first place winner would receive $1,200. The second place winner would receive $800. And then we have something called People's Choice or Audience Choice, and that person would receive $500. There's also a really exciting opportunity this year for the first time to move on to our first annual CSU-wide Grad Slam, which SJSU is hosting. So this gives you some statewide exposure and a chance to get some more prizes, which is very, very exciting. And then probably the most important reason why you should consider applying is that this is a really great professional development experience that you can add to your resume. You will be producing a video that you can include on your LinkedIn profile or any other digital profiles that you might have for your professionalism. And it's just great because, as you all may know, employers don't just look at your resume anymore. They do Google you. They will look for whatever media is out there about you. And so this is a great professional way to showcase your communication skills as well as your research in a very compelling format. So that's a really, really great reason why you should consider applying.
We're going to see an example in just a minute, but Amy, do you want to tell everybody what you think they might want to look for in this video?
Thank you, Cheryl. So right after this video, I'll lead a little bit of discussion about some good points that we can learn from this presentation to kind of work backwards and apply to our own. But as kind of a challenge for yourself, try to see how she engages the audience. How does she bring the audience into her topic when they don't know a lot about it? She kind of eases it in a really powerful way. So please be on the lookout for that as you watch this video.
Who are you wearing? We hear celebrities being asked this question frequently on the red carpet. While seemingly a superficial inquiry into fashion, a celebrity's response speaks volumes about their style, professional connections, and wealth. And it's not just celebrities with carefully crafted images. People in general are concerned with how they portray themselves and, more importantly, how they are perceived by others. One way we build our social selves is through things we own and can display to our peers. Part of our motivation to do this is to construct social identity, and part is to create social competition. I'm sure some of you wear a ring on your left hand to signal that you're married. That's social identity. And maybe on your drive here today, you saw someone behind the wheel of a Tesla while you were in your Prius. That's social competition. Materials help define who we are and who we are not. And my research aims to understand how individuals use materiality to construct social identity. But I probably don't study the types of objects you think. I study the funerary materiality of ancient Egypt. The Egyptians spent a lot of time preparing for death. Their tomb equipment included food and drink, furniture, clothing, jewelry, makeup, statuary, coffins, papyri. While the Egyptians believed that these items were necessary provisions for the afterlife, the internment of such items also acted as a form of social display and competition. Egyptian coffins, for example, were the same as that Prius and Tesla today. They both get you from point A to point B, whether that's from home to work or from this world to the afterlife. But it's the quality of the transportation that's key to that social competition. My research focuses on funerary papyri, like the Book of the Dead. Most Egyptologists only study these documents for their religious value, but their social significance is critical for understanding the people behind the papyri. So I studied these documents and recorded the names of over 500 Egyptians, plus details about their families, careers, wealth, and status. My research brought back to life a group of Egyptians who lived 3,000 years ago and demonstrates that they felt the same anxiety and pressure to navigate the social world as we do today. By learning from the past, we as a society are better equipped to understand our own motivations to construct social identity through what we drive, what we buy, and what we wear. So, who are you wearing today, and why? Thank you.
So there are a lot of things to be happy about in this presentation. I'm just going to briefly point out 4 of them about how she kind of invites her audience into her topic. So to begin with, she starts with the audience themselves. She says things that they are going to be familiar with. She says, who are you wearing? How do you build your structural identity, your social identity? And she talks about wedding rings, for example, or the difference between driving a Tesla and a Prius. And did you notice how she got that laughter there? She kind of calmed her audience down, relaxed them with a little bit of humor before bringing them into her topic. So she's already set up her framework before she shifts. And it's kind of a surprising shift because she was talking about modern things, but she shifts to talk about ancient Egypt. So this is a really effective way to bring people into what may seem like an esoteric or maybe unrelevant topic to them. Another thing that helps bring people in is she uses her slides in a visual way. If you notice, her slides only contain pictures. So they serve not as a replacement for her, but by showing visual examples of what she's talking about. So she doesn't have to go into super deep detail, but just by showing, the audience has something to reference. Another thing she does is that she references the Book of the Dead. Now, many people will be aware of the Book of the Dead from different, maybe popular media sources or movies. So she says, now most people read the Book of the Dead for the death rites, but I'm looking at material culture. So she activates knowledge they have, but then she surprises them by showing how she uses them in a different way. And finally, she brings everything back together by saying why her research is unique or relevant. So I'm studying all of these people's lives, what they bought, what they thought, in order to bring them back to life, to see the identity that they constructed. And then she ends kind of full circle by saying, so who are you wearing? What story are you going to tell? So she starts with you, brings you on this journey, and then ends with this interesting thought for the takeaway for the audience in their normal lives. Because as a person who's like an expert in your field talking to a non-specialist audience, you want them to have that kind of takeaway that's relevant for their own lives, either something they should have learned or something they should do differently. That's kind of a call to action.
Thank you, Amy. So what is the process? Initially, you're going to need to submit an application for review by a multidisciplinary team, and we'll go over the application shortly. You're going to need to prepare an abstract, and you need to think about this a little bit. How can you describe your research to one of your friends who isn't in your field? Why is your research important? What is different? What have you found? At the time that you submit the application, you will also need to provide us with the name of your research supervisor or your graduate advisor. Your research advisor may be a professor in charge of a lab or one that you're working with on a thesis or a project. Not all disciplines have research supervisors. If you don't have that type of supervisor, please contact your graduate advisor for your program. And if you don't know who that is, we can help you determine who it is that you need to reach out to. And you're just going to need to show them your work. Semifinalists are going to be chosen based on their application.
So now we're going to do a quick look at the actual application itself. This is a Google form, which I will put a link to in the chat shortly. But just to give you an overview of what we are asking for, we start off just asking basic information about you, your email address, first and last name, your ID number, and the name of your graduate program. We do ask for the name of that faculty member, as Cheryl was just mentioning, who is responsible for supervising your research or your creative work, or the graduate advisor for your program. And then we ask if you're interested in attending some optional but highly recommended workshops focused on developing your public speaking skills. So Amy is going to talk about that a little bit later, as she will be leading these workshops. They are completely optional, but we do highly recommend that you take advantage of this, as some of our most successful students in previous years did make use of this resource. So it's a really great opportunity for you to sharpen up your skills in advance of the competition. Then we ask, if selected as a semifinalist, would you be interested in being professionally filmed at SJSU? So this has changed a little bit since we added this question. We're thinking that most likely participants will make an appointment for a Zoom conference with a professional videographer, and then they will have 2 attempts to record their presentation. And at that point, the student could select the best of the 2 presentations to send off to the College of Graduate Studies. So initially, we were hoping to bring students onto campus with all the safety measures in place, of course, but we're thinking that that will change a little bit. So we'll notify students about that situation if it comes up. We then ask if you need any disability accommodations or services. For purposes of this form, just answer yes or no, but if you would like to provide any more detail, feel free to reach out to us at our College of Graduate Studies email, and I'll put that in the chat a little bit later as well. Then we ask about the title of your presentation and the abstract. So we'll talk a little bit about abstracts, I think, on the next slide, but please note that this should be 300 words or fewer. Then towards the end, we ask, by submitting this form, you certify you are aware that your research and presentation will be available to the general public. So because this is a public event, even though it is virtual, we have to make sure that you know that, we may be taking photos. Of course, it will be on video because it is a video, but just to make sure that you know that. And then lastly, on the same note, if you're selected to participate in the Grad Slam, you understand that you will be photographed and your presentation recorded. And again, since it is a public event, we may be featuring clips of these videos on our website or our other social media channels. And that is the application. We will put a link in the chat so that you can look at this directly. So now a little bit about abstracts. Your abstract is a critical component of your application. Again, as I just mentioned, they should be 300 words or fewer, but usually abstracts are about 100 to 300 words long. And they do vary by discipline, but within a discipline, they usually follow some predictable patterns. So I'm going to ask if Amy wants to say a few words about abstracts being from the Writing Center.
Thank you, Julia. So as she was saying, abstracts are meant to kind of represent your whole research project in miniature. Now, it's okay. I know not all of you will be done with your research before the time of the competition when you have to submit the application. So you can put kind of like speculative results, where you think your project is going, what will we learn? The really important thing to know is that each sentence should do a different job. Under 300 words is not a lot of room, so you want to make sure that each sentence really packs a punch. So the introductory context, not just what your unique research project is doing, but make sure you give the context of where it lives in the world of research in your field. And make sure that you say why it's important. Why is this relevant and important for a general audience to know, not just people in your own unique research field? You have to make it relevant. Remember the purpose of the competition. Whenever you write an abstract, whether it's for your thesis, this competition, a conference, each kind of abstract has a purpose. So think about what your audience wants to know. And in this case, it's why is your research topic important and relevant to a general audience? So make sure you briefly include your introduction, purpose, your methods, your results, and your conclusions. You don't have to go super, super detailed, but just so we can get a general understanding of what's going to happen. And I believe Julia has a link to the Writing Center's abstract guide, which can provide more detailed examples for you to study. And also, I would recommend that you could write your abstract, then bring it into the Writing Center and work with one of our tutors one-on-one to review it before you submit.
That's a great suggestion. And I will also make a quick comment about abstracts for humanities or social sciences papers may look a little bit different from ones that, you might be writing for biology or chemistry. So as Amy was mentioning, each sentence has a particular job or function. For abstracts that may be in humanities, the abstract sort of gives an overview of the content and the scope of the study. And then ultimately, you just need to make sure that everything you include is necessary and relevant. As Amy mentioned, it is a short space and it goes by very quickly. So make sure that you are intentional about that, and definitely take advantage of the Writing Center. Regardless of what field you're in, they can help you out as you're putting together your abstract. Thanks,
Julia and Amy. So I'm going to go over a little bit about what happens to semifinalists and finalists. The application is the first part of the process. Semifinalists will be chosen, as I mentioned earlier, from the applications. So please make your abstracts compelling. All semifinalists will be able to attend public speaking workshops, which we will discuss next. As Julia mentioned, you will need to create a video of you presenting your research, not longer than 3 minutes, not 3 minutes and 1 second. Anything over 3 minutes is disqualified. And as we discussed, we are currently in the process of trying to negotiate with a professional videographer who will send you a Zoom invitation to be recorded. And of course, we'll work around your schedules. It'll be over the course of a couple of days, and you will have a couple of tries. But please note that video production value is not assessed as part of the final judging process. Your videos will then be forwarded to a panel of our judges. Finalists will be notified and must be available to attend the celebration of research where the winners will be announced. I will mention here that finalists will have the opportunity, I believe Julia mentioned that, will have the opportunity to move on to our first CSU-wide Grad Slam event, which is really going to be quite exciting. We have 14 participating campuses right now. There will be opportunities to be in either STEM or non-STEM at the CSU-wide competition, not at ours. But the finalists will have an opportunity, so we'll work with you to get you prepared for the big competition coming in May.
So I mentioned before that we will have some optional but highly recommended public speaking workshops. We have our wonderful facilitator, Amy, here to talk about what these workshops will entail if you move on as a semifinalist.
Thank you, Julia. So just to give you a brief overview, there are 3 different types of workshops that are being offered. Session A is an hour and a half over Zoom, and we talk about organization and tailoring content. So it's how do you take your topic from your field and then again bridge it to where you're talking to that general non-specialist audience. We talk about how do you engage an audience, how do we sequence and organize your speech, and finally, very importantly, how do you make a very clear slide? In this competition, you will only have one, so it will be important to really put some thought and work into this one slide so it can be an effective counterpoint and tool for your presentation. So that's the first one, is kind of like the what. In session B, again, this is an hour and a half, it's held over Zoom, and it will be about the how do you do it. So we'll talk about speech delivery, so using gestures, body language, and also stage presence. Even when you're on Zoom, there are different ways that you can present, that you can interact for your camera. Like, for example, to make eye contact, I have to look directly at my camera. If I'm looking down over here, like actually reading any notes, it will look like I'm not paying attention. So one tip is you need to make eye contact at critical parts of your speech, for example, your intro and conclusion, by looking directly at wherever your camera is. So there's one preview tip for you. Also, which kind of leads into the second topic of session B, is recording. So we will be going over some very basic filming techniques. Of course, if you're selected, you'll be meeting with someone who is very skilled at this, but this is to serve as kind of an introduction so you can start asking good questions and start getting your stage set up ready for filming. And finally, in session A and B are group sessions. So we won't be talking about necessarily your individual speech topics because it's a competition, but we'll be learning general skills together. In session C is individual. This is where you can get personalized feedback. So you will have a draft version of your presentation, and then you'll work with me or me and a few other people, depending on schedules, and we will give you feedback about how your delivery and your slides are. And you'll have a 30-minute one-on-one. So like we'll watch, we'll do some feedback, there'll be a chance for questions, and then we'll go from there. So hopefully you can polish up your presentation and slides to make a really powerful second and final version to deliver to the College of Graduate Studies. And those are our 3 different sections. In addition, on the 2021 Grad Slam site, under the tab for public speaking sessions, if you scroll all the way to the bottom, we have some free online resources. These are different videos that we've collected on things like body language, gestures, confidence on stage, that you can watch in your own free time. And those are available right now if you wanted to get started.
Thank you so much, Amy. I think next we have another example of a STEM Grad Slam style submission. Amy, is there anything that you want to ask folks to pay attention to before we watch this?
Yeah, the 2 things I would like to pay attention to here are, number 1, so this is a PhD STEM student from biology. So he has actually a very technical topic. So I want you to think about, how does he take this very technical topic and make it inclusive for a general audience? In addition, what does his slide look like? So both how you make his technical topic accessible and also his slide design. And then we'll talk about it after the video.
Take your hand and put it on your face. Now imagine your hand is a parasite, a lot like a tick, but instead of sucking out your blood, it's liquefying one of your internal organs and sucking part of that out of your body. If you were a honeybee, you wouldn't have to imagine. You'd know this nightmare all too well already. I'm talking about the parasitic mite Varroa destructor. And no, the name isn't overly dramatic. This is one crazy parasite. Pesticides may currently dominate the discussion on why our honeybees are dying in such high numbers, but the science is clear that Varroa destructor is the main reason for it. And this is definitely something that we should be concerned about. How many of you had coffee this morning? You have honeybees to thank for that, as well as 1/3 of every bite of food that reaches your mouth. So it may surprise you to find out that with Varroa being so important to the health of such a vital organism, that we don't know what they're eating when they attach themselves to bees. It's been accepted as axiomatic that Varroa feed on the bee's blood, but while looking through the body of research, I found that we've been citing a study for nearly half a century that never actually proved that. Enter my project. The goal was to figure out what Varroa is eating. I started with the question, where do they feed? If they can feed anywhere on a bee, the way that a tick can on you, then they're probably feeding on blood. However, if they feed only in one spot, maybe they're eating a tissue specific to that location. The results? They feed only in one spot, on the underside of the bee's abdomen. The tissue in this area is called the fat body, and this is significant because the fat body doesn't just store nutrients. It detoxifies pesticides, regulates hormone levels, it produces the honeybee's primary immune response to microbial invaders, and that's just 4 of its 9 functions. So, I stained the bee's fat body and blood with fluorescent tissue-specific biostains and recorded what we found in the mites. While they did ingest some blood, the vast majority of their meal was fat body. Then I needed to determine which of these tissues was integral to Varroa's survivorship and reproduction. I did this by allowing them to feed on decoy bees that I constructed and filled with blood or fat body. Varroa-fed blood died quickly and produced very few eggs, no different from the group that was starved. However, those fed fat body were the only ones able to survive the full 7-day duration of the study, and they produced 6 times more eggs. So it appears we had it wrong. We've been thinking of these parasites as vampires, when they're actually more like werewolves. And maybe we've had so little success in killing them because we've been trying to drive a stake through something for which we needed a silver bullet. Now, we're investigating the question of whether we can introduce an agent into the fat body that will disrupt the reproductive cycle of Varroa when they feed. Hopefully, these findings will lead to a day when this parasite is affectionately called the crisis formerly known as Varroa destructor.
All right, so I'll point out just a few things that I hope you notice while watching. Number 1 is that he takes time to bring you into his topic. So he starts by saying, did you have a cup of coffee this morning? You have honeybees to thank for that. And 1/3 of every bite of food that reaches your mouth. So he starts by saying, what does everyone have in common? Of course, eating and drinking. So people may not realize how connected honeybees are to their kind of daily life. So he makes it immediately relevant. Then he shows you why his study is important. So he says, okay, it's really important for food and coffee. And then he's like, the problem is that they were citing a study that said A, but this hadn't been proven and was nearly 50 years old. So he said, so my study was going to finally confirm that. And later on, he tells us that his study at the end actually discovered that the original study had it wrong. So that's a nice little closing loop that he has between the beginning and end of his speech. When he's describing the steps of what he did, so he's talking about how he decided where to find the parasites on the body, then how he fed them, his 3 different groups. So he is describing in a fairly abstract way what he did, but we still understand the different steps, even if we don't always understand everything he did or why he did. He gave us enough information. It's not so detailed that people are going to feel pushed out or feel excluded by his speech. That would be really important. When you make your presentation, you both want to make it relevant, but also accessible. By accessible, I mean understandable. You want people to feel like they could walk away and tell their friend about your research, make them curious and hungry for more. And finally, at the very end of his presentation, he gives us another analogy as a way to understand what he says. So he's like, we used to think that they were vampires, but it turns out they were more like werewolves. So we have to find a special way to kind of get rid of them. So he's using vampires and werewolves because he expects his audience, which was in general Americans, to understand those analogies so they could take that away, even if they don't remember each of the little steps that he did. And then finally, with his slide design, could you bring up his slide design for a second, please?
I think I can.
So his slide, so he has only one, so it's very similar to what you will do, has 3 different areas. So the first image is like a scientific diagram from his study. And then he points to a real live bee and circles where the parasites are. And then finally, the third picture is like a dissected bee where you can see in the middle of it. So that's kind of like what his research is doing. So in a very visual way, notice there isn't a ton of text on his slide. He's showing us what he's doing. So remember, a slide, people can read a slide or they can listen to you. They can't do both. A slide should never be a replacement for you as a speaker. It's only meant to support and strengthen what you are saying. So this would be a really good example to study. Thank you.
Thanks, Amy. So there's always rules, and the rules are very self-explanatory on this particular slide. You may only use a single static PowerPoint or Google slide. There should be no transitions, no animations, or movement of any kind. The slide is in this competition will actually be up on the screen at the time that you start your presentation. So you should be aware of that. The judges will view this based on how they view the Zoom. So they could be viewing you or the slide or both in a half and half screen. And we'll go over some of that when we do when Amy works with you on videographing. There should be no other electronic media. So no sound bites inside files are going to be permitted. No props. If you're studying pirates, please do not put a parrot on your shoulder. No musical instruments, no laboratory equipment will be permitted. But the big thing here, and this is where you really have to practice, presentations are limited to 3 minutes maximum, and anything over that, you're disqualified. So you can be under, but you don't want to be too far under either, because you want to be able to get your point across. So it's really trying to hit the mark, and that's where Amy and her team and all of us who are reviewing your videos before submission to the judges will try and help you. And presentations are to be delivered in a traditional presentation style. So you can't sing your presentation nor rap your presentation.
Here we have a list of important deadlines associated with the Grad Slam. So the most important one for you all at this stage is March 19th, which is the deadline to submit that Grad Slam application Google form, which I put a link to in the chat so that you can open that up and bookmark it in case you are interested in applying. And then if you do move on as a semifinalist, these other deadlines will become more important to you. And all of these are also listed on the Grad Slam Google site, which is also in the chat. Again, this is the main site where you can get information about the Grad Slam. It is a Google site. The link is in the chat. But if you have any questions that can't be answered from that site or that were not answered so far, you can always contact us at graduate-studies@sjsu.edu. And please make sure to put the subject line Grad Slam so that we can make sure to sort your inquiries accordingly. And with that, we will move into Q&A. We will stop the recording so that you all can feel free to ask whatever you would like.